This is just a series that I always do. I always do at least one day of this every week, of this particular series.
Joe Rogan, 58. The only 5 foods he eats to build real strength. Joe Rogan was almost 60 years old when he made a decision that shocked even his closest friends. He stopped eating vegetables, cut out carbs, dropped sugar completely, and within weeks, something bizarre started happening to his body. Chronic inflammation disappeared.
Your body is built out of what you eat. So if you're eating garbage, your body doesn't have anything to work with. And if you're eating good, healthy food, your body has healthy nutrients, your body can build itself and repair itself.
Energy skyrocketed, even his autoimmune condition began improving. But behind the transformation was a dangerous problem most people never see coming, one that can literally starve your body while you're still eating. At first, Joe's diet sounded completely insane. Steak, elk, eggs, bacon, fish, over and over again. No salads, no fruit, no bread. Yet somehow the results were impossible to ignore. He lost weight, recovered faster, and claimed he felt better than he had in years. But the deeper you look into his routine, the more fascinating it becomes. Because every food, every supplement, and every adjustment had a specific purpose rooted in biology, inflammation, and survival itself. For most people, food is automatic, break fast on the way to work, snacks when bored, sugar for energy, fast food for convenience. Very few people ever stop and ask a terrifyingly simple question. What is this actually doing to my body? That question became impossible for Joe Rogan to ignore. For years, Joe dealt with inflammation, energy crashes, and vitiligo, an autoimmune condition where the immune system attacks the body's own pigment cells. Like millions of people, he started noticing something strange. Certain foods didn't just affect his weight, they affected how his entire body felt: pain, brain fog, fatigue, joint stiffness, and the more attention he paid, the more obvious the pattern became. That realization led him toward one of the most extreme diet experiments of his life. The carnivore diet: no vegetables, no fruit, no grains, no sugar. Well, just animal-based foods. To most people, it sounded ridiculous. Dangerous, even. Nutrition culture had spent decades teaching the exact opposite. Eat balanced meals, prioritize plants, avoid red meat. But Joe wasn't interested in theories anymore. He was interested in results, and the foundation of his new diet started with one food above all else. Steak, not just any steak. Grass-fed beef. That distinction matters far more than most people realize. Cows raised on grass develop a different nutritional profile than cows raised on grain. Grass-fed beef contains higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids, compounds strongly associated with reducing inflammation throughout the body. And for Joe, inflammation was the enemy. One of the first things he noticed after removing carbohydrates was something almost everyone on low-carb diets talks about eventually. The crashes disappeared normally. High carbohydrate meals create spikes in blood sugar followed by sharp drops later. That crash leaves people tired, hungry, foggy, and constantly reaching for more food. Joe claimed that once carbohydrates disappeared from his diet, roller coaster vanished with them. Steady energy replaced constant fluctuations. No afternoon crash, no desperate hunger swings, just consistency. That's one reason steak became the anchor of his dinners. Dense protein, high calories, rich nutrients, and enough satiety to keep him full for hours. But then Joe added something even more interesting: elk meat. This wasn't just another protein source. Elk represented something deeper about how Joe thinks about food itself. Joe is a lifelong hunter, and elk is one of the wildest, leanest meats available. Unlike factory-farmed meat, wild elk isn't pumped with hormones or routinely exposed to antibiotics. It lives naturally, eats naturally, and develops extremely lean muscle tissue as a result. Nutritionally, elk is fascinating. Very high protein, very low fat, and that low fat content created a hidden problem Joe didn't fully understand at first. Because when he ate elk, he noticed something unusual. He felt incredibly clean afterward, not heavy, not sluggish, not bloated, just. Fueled, that feeling became addictive. The body digests lean wild meat differently than heavily processed food. There's no sugar spike, no greasy crash, just protein entering the system efficiently. Joe described it as eating without feeling weighed down afterward. But what seemed healthy at first carried a dangerous risk underneath it, and Joe discovered it the hard way. Before we get there though, another food became a critical part of his routine: fish. If steak provided strength and elk provided clean protein, fish became his anti-inflammatory weapon. Fish like salmon and sardines contain some of the most studied omega-3 fatty acids in nutritional science. These compounds help regulate inflammation, support brain health, and improve cardiovascular function. For someone dealing with autoimmune symptoms, that matters enormously because autoimmune diseases are often deeply connected to chronic inflammation inside the body. The immune system becomes overactive, misfires, and starts attacking healthy tissue. Joe wasn't simply eating fish because it was healthy. He was strategically feeding his body nutrients known to calm inflammatory responses. And this is where his diet starts looking less random and more intentional. Every food served a purpose. Steak for protein and satiety, elk for clean, lean nutrition, fish for inflammation control. Then came eggs, lots of them. Most people think of eggs as a side dish, something small, quick breakfast food, but nutritionally, eggs are astonishingly dense. They contain high-quality protein, healthy fats, choline for brain function, essential vitamins, and nutrients required for cellular repair. Some nutritionists even call eggs one of the closest things to a perfect food. Joe leaned heavily into them. One morning, he described eating 6 eggs alongside steak before the day had even fully started. That's not a light breakfast. That's a massive protein load early in the morning. And here's why that matters. Protein doesn't just build muscle. It affects satiety hormones, recovery, metabolism, and tissue repair. High-protein meals can keep people full for dramatically longer than carbohydrate-heavy breakfasts. But as Joe pushed deeper into the carnivore lifestyle, he encountered a problem almost nobody talks about. Problem so severe it has an almost unbelievable name: rabbit starvation. At first, the term sounds fake, almost comical, but it's very real. Historically, explorers and hunters discovered something terrifying when surviving on extremely lean meat alone: wool. Animals like rabbits contain almost no body fat. People could eat huge quantities of rabbit meat and still become weak, sick, nauseous, and eventually starve. Why? Because the human body cannot efficiently survive on pure lean protein alone. It needs fat or carbohydrates for fuel. Without enough fat, the liver becomes overwhelmed processing excessive protein intake. Energy collapses. Hormones suffer. The body literally struggles to sustain itself despite constant eating. And Joe realized elk was pushing him dangerously close to that problem because elk is incredibly lean, too lean. That's why he started deliberately adding fat back into his diet, most notably through bacon. Now suddenly, his diet started making biological sense. The bacon wasn't junk food. It was fuel. Fat became the energy source replacing carbohydrates. Once carbs disappear, the body shifts toward burning fat and producing ketones for energy, a metabolic state called ketosis. But ketosis only works if sufficient fat exists in the diet. Without it, the system falls apart. This became one of the biggest misconceptions people have about carnivore eating. They assume it's simply eat meat. But Joe quickly learned it's actually about balancing protein with enough fat to sustain energy production. Too much lean protein alone can become catastrophic. That realization completely changed how he approached meals. And as his body adapted, something shocking started happening. He began feeling better than he had in years. Joint pain decreased, energy stabilized, recovery improved, inflammation dropped dramatically. Even his vitiligo started showing signs of improvement. That's when Joe understood something profound. Food wasn't just calories anymore. It was information. Every meal either fueled inflammation or fought against it. And the deeper he went into the experiment, the more obvious that connection became. But there was still one major problem left to solve, because even if the carnivore diet made him feel incredible, there was a question hanging over everything. What happens when you remove entire food groups from your life? That's where supplements entered the picture, and why Joe refused to rely on meat alone. That's the part most people completely misunderstand about Joe Rogan and the carnivore diet. They assume he blindly jumped into an all-meat lifestyle and ignored every possible nutritional concern. But the reality was almost the opposite. Joe understood something important very early on. Extreme diets create blind spots. Even if his body felt incredible eating mostly animal foods, he knew there were still nutrients he needed to pay attention to carefully. That's why supplements became a critical part of the system. Not optional, necessary. Joe openly talked about taking multivitamins, amino acids, fish oil, and additional nutrients specifically to cover gaps that can appear when entire categories of food disappear from your diet. Because here's the truth most diet debates ignore. No diet is perfect. Every nutritional approach has trade-offs. Plant-heavy diets can lack certain amino acids, iron, or B12. Extreme low-fat diets can damage hormones and energy production. And carnivore diets can potentially leave gaps in micronutrients traditionally obtained from fruits, vegetables, and plant fibers. Joe wasn't pretending otherwise. Instead, he approached the problem strategically. The multivitamin acted like insurance. Vitamin C, B-complex nutrients, magnesium, zinc, and trace minerals helped ensure his body still received critical micronutrients even while eating primarily meat. Then came fish oil, and this is where things get fascinating scientifically. Omega-3 fatty acids are among the most researched anti-inflammatory compounds in modern nutrition. They help regulate inflammatory signaling pathways throughout the body, particularly chemicals linked to chronic inflammation and autoimmune dysfunction. For someone dealing with vitiligo, that mattered enormously because autoimmune diseases often involve the immune system becoming hyperactive and attacking healthy tissue by mistake. Reducing systemic inflammation can sometimes reduce symptom severity dramatically. Joe described fish oil almost like a reinforcement system layered on top of the diet itself. The food handled most of the inflammation. The supplements strengthened the foundation underneath it, and suddenly the entire diet stopped looking reckless. It started looking calculated. Every decision had a purpose. Every food solved a problem. Every supplement patched a weakness. But then something happened that made Joe's story far more believable than most celebrity health transformations online. He broke the diet completely, not a small cheat meal, not one cookie, a full weekend collapse, and honestly, this may have been the most important part of the entire experiment, because perfection is easy to fake online. Reality isn't. Joe went to Disneyland with his family and decided to eat like a normal person again. Ice cream, pasta, sugar, processed snacks. Even Girl Scout cookies. For most people, that sounds harmless, maybe even fun. But what happened next genuinely shocked him. At first, everything tasted great. Dopamine rush from sugar and processed carbohydrates hit exactly the way it does for millions of people every day. Fast pleasure, instant gratification, temporary comfort. Then his body responded, and it responded aggressively. By the next day, inflammation exploded. His back started hurting, his knees started aching. Old pain returned almost immediately. The fatigue came back too. It felt like his body had triggered some kind of internal alarm system. And the most shocking part? It happened incredibly fast. That's what made the experience so revealing. Most people live with inflammation constantly, so they never notice how bad they actually feel. Brain fog, soreness, sluggishness, stiffness. It becomes normal because it's always there. But after weeks of feeling clean and stable on the carnivore diet, Joe's body suddenly noticed the difference immediately. The contrast became impossible to ignore. And here's what's even crazier. Recovery was just as fast. Joe went straight back to strict carnivore eating Monday morning. By Tuesday, roughly 48 hours later, the inflammation and pain had mostly disappeared again. That rapid shift completely changed how he viewed food forever, because now he wasn't relying on theory anymore. His body had shown him direct cause and effect. Eat one way, feel one way, eat another way, feel completely different. That realization is honestly the most valuable part of Joe Rogan's entire story. Not the steak, not the elk, not the supplements. Awareness. Most people never connect their physical state to what they consistently put into their body. They separate food from energy, food from mood, food from pain, food from recovery. But the body doesn't separate those things. It responds to everything. Every meal is biochemical information. Every ingredient sends signals. Inflammation or recovery, energy or crashes, healing or stress. Joe simply became hyper-aware of the conversation happening inside his body, and once he saw the connection clearly, he couldn't unsee it anymore. Now, to be clear, Joe himself has repeatedly admitted the carnivore diet may not be ideal for every human being on Earth. Different bodies respond differently. Genetics matter, medical history matters, lifestyle matters. But his experience exposed something undeniably important. Modern processed food affects people far more than they realize. Sugar, refined carbohydrates, ultra-processed snacks, artificial ingredients. Many people consume these constantly without ever stopping long enough up to observe what happens when they disappear. Joe did stop, and the results shocked him. Over the course of the experiment, he lost weight, reduced inflammation, improved recovery, while stabilized his energy, and saw improvement in an autoimmune condition he had battled for years. Not through some miracle drug, not through surgery, not through a celebrity shortcut, through food. That's what makes this story resonate with so many people. Because underneath the extreme headlines and internet debates is a very simple idea. Your body is built from whatever